Hey guys, what up? Back at it again. This is for 2018, and yes, I can see the future. But in all seriousness, I do put a lot of effort into this list and trying to figure out like what recommendations I would make for the best languages to learn for the future. And granted, you know we're three-quarters of the way through the year. It's not entirely over, but things don't change that quickly. Not some language isn't going to spring up in the next 4 months and be like, oh yeah, that's the new shit, and everybody's got to learn it. It doesn't work that way. So the languages that we're using day in and day out, they've been written decades ago. Most of them have been written before you were born, probably. So things do not change that quickly. But you know, year to year, things I think change enough for me to be able to do a new video on the top languages that I think you should learn in 2018. And just a brief background: I'm a programmer. I've been doing this for about 8 years or so, and I work professionally in the industry. Obviously, I have a channel now with close to 100,000 subscribers at this point. All right, so getting started, let's go ahead and jump right into this because I don't want to take too much of your time. Number 10 on this list is TypeScript. So this brings static type checking to JavaScript, which is something that JavaScript severely lacks. Now, that can also be considered a strength, depending on who you ask, or it can be considered the biggest weakness and the biggest problem with JavaScript. So TypeScript aims to solve that issue by being its own programming language that compiles down to JavaScript. It's actually a preprocessor for the JavaScript language. So you write in a TypeScript static type checking safe specific way, and then it will then you can compile it to just regular raw JavaScript that runs inside of a browser. But TypeScript is considered a programming language. The fact that it's rivaling the latest standards of JavaScript and whether or not you should choose to use something like Babel or go with something like TypeScript. You know, you can write modern JavaScript with Babel to compile it to older versions if you need it, if you need to support older browsers, or you can use TypeScript. So it's really two different things. If you want static type checking with JavaScript, you're going to use something like Flow. Otherwise, you can use TypeScript. Those are the two choices there, and for that reason, TypeScript definitely makes the top 10 this year. Number 9 is Rust. Man, this is an awesome systems level language that's written by the Mozilla developers. This is a relatively new language, a few years old, not widely used in the industry yet, but it's created by the guys that originally wrote Firefox web browser. They create a lot of the standards on the web, and they've been working at that for decades now. So the Mozilla guys definitely know what they're doing, and Rust has a lot of potential to be a very powerful language in the future, especially as it gets more and more widely adopted. Number 8 is Java. This is one of the most widely used languages on this list, but I have it as number 8 because unless you want to be a Java developer, like for me, there's not a ton of reasons to want to learn Java or to learn it in 2018. But that said, there are plenty of Java jobs out there. There's Android development that uses Java, and it seems like the industry is cooling down a little bit with Java dominating the jobs market. We've seen a lot of jobs start moving to different stacks and things, especially web servers and things of that nature. They don't all need to be written in Java anymore. We don't need we don't need a fully object-oriented language to do everything that we need to do. But that said, Java is still a very widely used language, especially in corporate United States or abroad as well. There's definitely a lot of opportunity in Java, but it's not, in my opinion, it's not my favorite language, that's for sure. It was originally developed by Sun Microsystems. Sun Microsystems was bought by Oracle, so now Oracle actually controls Java's destiny. Number 7 is C++. So there is no question that most games are written in C++. Most gaming engines, whether it's Unreal Engine or even some of the physics engines that we're using out there, like the Bullet physics engine and things like that, that's going to be all written in C and C++. So this is a language that does not hold your hand. This is a difficult language to code in, but it is also very powerful. It's like driving a Corvette without brakes, basically. There is no garbage collection. You have to do memory management, dealing with pointers and things like that. So not something that is very easy or geared towards beginner developers, but if you can master C, you can certainly master any programming language on this list. Number 6 is Swift. So this is Apple's new language. It's replacing Objective-C, which was Apple's solution for really all of Apple's. It was Apple's solution to all of their software. So if you're going to be an Apple developer, you want to work for Apple one day, then Swift is definitely the direction that you want to go in. You can write iOS apps and everything within with using Swift. It's also a much easier language to work with than Objective-C. It's not necessarily going to completely replace Objective-C, but for a lot of basic programming tasks, it's definitely the go-to language in the Apple ecosystem at this point. Number 5 is PHP, and this is actually high up on the list. A lot of people hate PHP because a lot of beginners write in PHP and they have security flaws with their code and they don't really understand what they're doing. But there's still a majority of websites out there are written on a PHP stack. So that means most websites that you visit, or most websites in existence, the majority of them are using PHP over any other language out there. PHP has Laravel, CodeIgniter, things like that. WordPress, which is a very popular blog that's also written using PHP. There's a lot of jobs in PHP, and it may not be the most fantastic type-safe language to deal with. It's a scripting language. It's a big piece of shit in certain areas, and it's very, very helpful and beneficial in others. So definitely not a bad choice, especially if your market, your geographic area has a lot of PHP opportunities. It's definitely a language you should learn in 2018. Number 4 is C#. C# is still very popular. It's Microsoft's flagship language. It's a language they created. A lot of people said they copied off of Java back in the day, but there's quite a few differences now between C# and Java, but they are both fully object-oriented languages that are owned by essentially large corporations and used by Fortune 500 companies around the world. So a lot of opportunity, just like with Java, there's going to be a lot of opportunity with C#. The reason why C# to me ranks a little bit higher than Java is just because of the things that Microsoft is doing. They've come out with some fantastic products lately, like Visual Studio Code. They bought Xamarin so you can start doing mobile apps, writing C#, things like that. They've done a lot of work with the Unity game engine, so you can write Unity games with C#. And the open source nature of .NET Core has really it's created the ability to have a C# server on a Linux server, or C# running on a Linux server. In fact, my buddy actually has a C# application on a DigitalOcean droplet, and I think he's using Ubuntu, and he's using MongoDB with .NET Core. So that's something that was not possible a few years ago, but with C#'s new direction, or Microsoft's new direction for C#, they're making it open source and cross-platform, and for that reason I have C# ranked a lot higher than Java. Number 3 is Python. This is the most taught language in IT schools, and not just bullshit like beginner level courses and things like that. I'm talking MIT, Carnegie Mellon, things like that. Some major universities, Stanford. Python's being taught because it's free, it's open source, and you can get up and running with Python very fast. It's object-oriented, but at the same time, it can also be written in just procedural type, and it's got some pretty decent power. It was actually Google's first choice for their search engine. So for the longest time, back in the 90s, early 2000s, and even now, Google has made heavy use of Python. And on top of that, it's used for websites like Instagram, YouTube, Reddit, Pinterest, a bunch of other websites, including my own website, Hipster Code. So Python is definitely a good language to learn. It's very widely diverse. The jobs exist all over the place. A lot of jobs in data science, so machine learning, things like that. They're all using Python. Number 2 is JavaScript. This is the only language that runs in the browser. So JavaScript is not going anywhere. We see many different stacks being written now in Node, and between with Node combined with Angular or React or Vue, the 3 I would say most popular JavaScript client-side solutions for really handling the entire framework. JavaScript is it's got a lot of promise here. I mean, there's a lot of promise with the language itself. They've made a lot of additions. The ES6 has brought us things like lexical scoping, We have constants. We have the arrow functions, which binds our this context. Just the decent amount of changes to the JavaScript language. Since it runs in a browser, sometimes it's difficult getting browsers to behave similarly. But for those reasons, we have things like jQuery and Babel and things like that that will handle those differences for us. So JavaScript, you cannot go wrong. Web development runs all of business really at this point, and most products are being written as software as a service platform type of thing, and for that reason, things have to run in the browser, and the only language that runs in the browser is JavaScript. So number one on this list is Go, man. This is made by the Google guys. In fact, Ken Thompson, who actually helped Dennis Ritchie develop C, or at least worked with Dennis Ritchie while he was developing C at Bell Labs in the 1970s. He actually had part of this language along with Rob Pike and a few other geniuses over at Google. And Golang has a lot of potential, man. It is one of the fastest growing languages out there right now. It's a systems level language. It's built with concurrency in mind. And I say that with emphasis because a lot of computers these days have multi-cores. Our processors aren't getting faster. We're just getting more cores. So that means we need parallelism and we need concurrency. And a lot of languages were developed way before we had these multi-core processors. Like that was never even a consideration when Python was first created, or even C# was first created, or anything. And Go, like they saw the writing on the wall, the Google people. They realized they needed a verbose, basic language that can be very, very powerful and make it very easy for developers to write concurrent applications, so that things you could run on multiple different threads and things like that, and multiple different cores. And if your program is designed well enough, and Go helps you do that, as well as Rust also does a very good job at that, then your programs are just going to be much more powerful written in Go. One of the downsides to it is it's still relatively new. It's not going to hold your hands. There's not going to be as much documentation or even as much of a community as something like Python. There's not a huge beginner environment. And when there's not a lot of beginners in a language, then that can sometimes be very, very difficult for newer developers to get involved in, just because you're going to make new mistakes when you're getting started with a new language. And the more people in the industry, the more people using that language, the more likelihood people are going to have the same questions as you. And there's going to be newbies just like you and things like that. So it's not like Go doesn't have noobs, but there's going to be some pretty hardcore systems level programmers that know a lot about C++ and C and things like that, and understand Go and the benefits that it has. And from what I've seen, sometimes there's not that same level of support. Let me help this this newbie out and make sure he understands the concepts and all this stuff. But all right, guys, that's my top 10 language. Let me know what you think, and have a good day. Bye.